For 25 years, I've worked in disasters across 36 countries. I've walked into chaos when the cameras were gone, when the headlines had moved on, and when the work was no longer symbolic, but brutally practical. My role was simple in theory and demanding in reality. Bring life-saving supplies into broken places and help people stabilize long enough to begin rebuilding. From emergency medical equipment and telemedicine systems to water purification for contaminated supplies, the work touched hundreds of thousands of lives. But here's the point. In every one of those countries, without exception, I had to pass through customs. I had to prove who I was. I had to document what I was bringing. Every piece of equipment was inspected. Every case was opened. Every purpose was questioned. Even in the poorest, least developed nations, places desperate for help, places that needed skilled people and resources far more than they needed bureaucracy, I was still required to enter legally, transparently, and under scrutiny. In some of those countries, corruption was blatant. Customs officials would attempt to shake me down, demanding I pay duty on equipment that we were donating to help save lives. We refused because we knew the money was going right into the pocket of that customs official, and eventually we were allowed to enter. The implication was clear: pay them personally or wait indefinitely. But the moment remains instructive. Even in broken systems, borders exist. Authority exists. Rules exist. And those rules were enforced, however imperfectly. Well, that reality matters, because today, in the United States, the most stable, prosperous, opportunity-rich nation the world has ever known, we are being asked to accept something that I have never once seen demanded elsewhere: the normalization of unchecked, unvetted mass entry into a sovereign country. I find that staggering. I've seen firsthand what most Americans have not. I have worked in nations where governments cannot protect their citizens, where prisons empty during unrest, where mental health institutions collapse, and where criminal organizations thrive in the absence of law. I have seen what happens when systems break down, not as an abstraction, but as a daily lived reality. And I can say without hesitation, most of the world does not function the way America does. Not even close. Now, that's not an insult to other nations. It's simply the truth. Stability is rare. Accountability is rare. Opportunity protected by law is rare. America is the exception, not the rule, and exceptions must be protected. Compassion is a virtue. Concern for human suffering is noble. America has always been a beacon for those yearning to be free, and that should never change. But compassion without structure, it's not kindness, it's negligence. A nation that refuses to enforce its own laws is not generous, it's reckless. A country that abandons vetting, process, and accountability is not welcoming, it's inviting chaos. Legal immigration is not cruelty. Border enforcement is not hatred. Standards are not oppression. They are the very mechanisms that make freedom possible. What is often lost in this conversation is that the legal path already exists. Those who truly seek opportunity, safety, and a better life can apply, be reviewed, be vetted, and be welcomed. Anything less undermines the very system that makes America worth coming to in the first place. When millions are allowed to enter undocumented, without background checks, without health screening, and without knowing who they are or where they came from, it does not merely strain resources, it alters the demographic, economic, and social fabric of a nation that generations have worked to build. No serious country can absorb that level of uncertainty without consequence. I didn't learn this from ideology. I learned it from experience. I have stood in places where lawlessness became normal, where corruption hollowed out trust, where borders were meaningless and human life was cheap. Those places did not fail because their people were bad. They failed because systems collapsed, rules eroded, and accountability disappeared. America is not immune to that fate. The most dangerous assumption we can make is that it can't happen here. History shows otherwise. Stability is not permanent. Freedom is not automatic. Prosperity is not self-sustaining. They require vigilance, responsibility, and the courage to protect what works, even when doing so is uncomfortable. Too many Americans argue from theory. Too few argue from having seen the alternative. If you have never lived without clean water, without reliable electricity, without functional hospitals, and without safe streets, without the rule of law, then you do not truly understand how extraordinary this country truly is. And you certainly should not gamble with it casually. Never assume you know what the rest of the world is like unless you've been there. Much of it is vastly more difficult, more dangerous, and more fragile than most Americans can imagine. America is not perfect, but it's precious. And the responsibility of those who understand that, who have seen what happens when nations fail, is to say so plainly, do not take this country for granted. Do not dismantle the safeguards that made it exceptional. Do not confuse compassion with surrender. Welcome those who come legally. Help those who truly seek freedom, but always protect the system that makes that freedom real. Because once it's gone, it's not easily rebuilt. And again, some of us have seen just how hard that rebuilding can be.